Hello, history friends. This is the first section of notes related to the Civil War, so I'm going to read through them and you are going to fill out your notes. Feel free to pause if you need more time or to go back or fast forward, whatever works best for you. So let's start with this first section of 14.3. Railroads become an increasingly important part of our country. Because the population in California had grown, we talked about the gold rush. Railroads are going to be used to start moving people, but also moving their crops, moving goods around the country, and people are going to use it to get around as well, just because it's so much faster than being on the horse and buggy. So Congress will start talking about adding new railroads, and this will become important because as it passes through a slave state or a free state, that's going to make a difference on how it's being built, but also, how they vote on things and if they're going to be able to move cotton through a free state or a slave state. So lots of big questions related to railroads. All right, in 1854, a new state is going to be formed. Let me make this picture a little smaller. Not a new state, my apologies, a new political party. And they're going to be called the Republican Party. And we still have that party today, so you've probably heard of it. So Free Soilers, Northern Whigs, Democrats, and the Republican, what comes out of them, will joined together in 1854 to meet and create this new party. They want to take a formal stance on slavery. They do not like slavery. They do not agree with it. And they want to get rid of the Kansas and Nebraska Act, and they want to repeal the Fugitive Slave Law. Those are two things that they do not like. And so Abraham Lincoln will be a part of that Republican Party moving forward. And we're going to hear his name in just a little bit. Congress is going to be fighting over slavery. This is not a new topic. We've been talking about it for a couple weeks now, that every time we add a slave state, we need to add a free state. We need to try and keep them equal. And so Congress is fighting every day about slavery. And so Senator Charles Sumner will speak out against slavery, and he's going to talk specifically about a guy from South Carolina, Senator Andrew Butler. And Butler's nephew is so mad about this that he actually goes and attacks Charles Sumner at his desk. He beats him with a cane, and it takes him 3 years to recover. So there's a political cartoon there at the bottom showing you that. And this just tells us that everyone was fighting about slavery, and it's starting to get very physical. So there'll be an election in 1856, and slavery is the big topic. We're going to have the Democrats have James Buchanan, the Republicans will have John C. Fremont, and then the American Party Know Nothing Party is going to nominate Millard Fillmore. Buchanan wins the election, and that's going to be the Democrat, because the Republicans and the American Party Know Nothing Party are going to split the free soil vote, and so Buchanan easily wins this election and becomes the 15th president. But he's a Democrat, and if you remember from last class, the Democrats were the ones who were forcing slavery down the throats of free soilers. So he is in support of it spreading a little bit. At this same time, President Lincoln is going to get his start in politics. So 1854, he's going to speak out against the evils of slavery. And he says that if you start to vote for him, he wants to end slavery once and for all. So he needs to run for office. He starts in Illinois, and he wants to run for a Senate seat and a House of Representatives seat. But he's going up against a guy named Stephen Douglas. And he thought that he was unbeatable. Lincoln and Douglas will have 7 public debates where they talk about slavery in each one of them. They're going to go around the state of Illinois and talk about the topic of slavery. Douglas likes the idea of popular sovereignty. He wants to ask the people in the state, what is popular? What should be allowed? Where Lincoln says, no more slavery at all. And so even though Lincoln loses this election, he is now going to be on the national stage. People have heard him speak. People think that they give him that nickname, Honest Abe, that he would be a great leader moving forward. And so there we have it, the 7 spots around our state where they went around and spoke. That's President Lincoln on the left and then Stephen Douglas on the right. So they were fighting for this position in Illinois. Again, Lincoln is saying no to slavery, and Douglas is saying, well, let's ask the people in the state, let's use popular sovereignty. And so, time flies when you're having fun, my history friends. This was in 1854. And then in 1858, he's going to run for office. So 2 years later, we have our next presidential election, the election of 1860, and our country is severely divided. The Democratic Party is going to split. The Democrats are going to find that they cannot agree on this idea of slavery. Northern Democrats are going to support that guy who went against Lincoln in the state of Illinois. Popular sovereignty. Let's ask the states what's popular within that state, what they want. Do they want slavery or not? where the South says, we don't want to ask anyone. We just want slavery to continue, and we want it to spread everywhere. And so he's going to, the leader of that Southern delegate party is going to be John C. Breckinridge. And then the Republican Party is going to be led by Abraham Lincoln. He'll be nominated as the presidential candidate for the Republican Party. He says slavery will not be allowed in any new territories. But he says slave states can keep slavery for now, and they can make decisions about it within their own border, within their state. He says free land will be available for farming in all of the territories, especially the new ones. He says higher taxes are going to be imposed, and he comes out and says no states are going to be allowed to secede from the Union, which means leave the Union, withdraw. We talked about that in our political cartoon last class. And so he is going to run for the presidency, and he says slavery will not be allowed in a new territory, but it can remain in the old ones. There's going to be another political party in 1860, the Constitutional Union Party. Their name is John Bell, the candidate for them. And they just believe that if everyone works together, our country will be fine. Sorry, John Bell, the time has passed for that. We've got too much fighting going on. So the election of 1860 is going to see Lincoln win, which makes sense because the South, the Democratic vote, had been split between two people. And so Lincoln is going to win by 500,000 votes. That's a big win. But the Southern states had already decided at that point that they would secede from the Union. Think about that tree political cartoon. They are going to cut off that limb, and they're going to join their own government if Lincoln wins. And so we've got 7 states there that are going to create their own government at this point. So after the states start leaving the Union, our country's in big trouble, and we know that we're really heading towards war. The North is going to try and compromise. President Buchanan, all right, we have to understand that when a president gets elected, they don't take over right away. There's a few months where the previous president is still in office. And so during those months before Lincoln can officially take over, so he has won, but he's not in office yet. We're going to see that President Buchanan does a couple things that create more problems for Lincoln when he does finally take over. He allows those 7 states to leave the Union. He says, well, I guess they didn't want Lincoln to win, so they can be their own country. He blames the North. He says the North should be returning all runaway slaves and that all territories should be open to slavery. We're going to see that someone suggests from Kentucky that we just change the Constitution, but the plan is going to be turned down because Lincoln is going to be the new president, and he's officially starting to be in charge, and he says slavery should be done for good. Except during this time, remember, those 7 states have seceded. They have withdrawn from the United States. So they're going to start creating their own government. They're going to call themselves the Confederate States of America, and that's going to be in 1861. They create their own constitution that says every state is independent. They said that slavery is allowed and protected in the southern states and that they will not pay a federal tax. So they are done paying money to the U.S. government because they're not part of the U.S. anymore, right? They are part of the Confederate States of America. They're going to have a president. There's his picture. His name is Jefferson Davis. He's the first and only president of the Confederate States. And Montgomery, Alabama is their first capital. It's going to move later on, but it's in Montgomery, Alabama to start. These states are going to, the southern states that have seceded, are going to start taking over government buildings because now they're saying we are our own government. We should be in charge of these buildings. But my friends, those buildings belong to the United States government. So things like forts and arsenals and post office, the mint, the schools, things like that. So the southern states identify one very particular fort that they want to get their hands on. It's called Fort Sumter, and it's off the coast of South Carolina. President Buchanan, even though he let those states go form their own government, he doesn't agree that they should take over the fort. He says the fort belongs to the U.S. military. It does not belong to the South just because it's in the South. And so Buchanan doesn't agree, and he's going to send a supply ship there to help the troops, because of course it's a military base. There are military members that are there. He sends a supply ship there to support those troops. But the Southern forces attack this boat, and then after that he basically shrugs his arms and says, well, I mean, it's done now. I guess they're in charge of the fort. But the North is very angry about this, and so is President Lincoln, and he's getting ready to take over. He's ready to take office March 4th, 1861. He's going to take a hard stance on this. He says there's no such thing as leaving the United States. You cannot just secede from the Union. It's not up to you. We are a union. We are the United States. You are not allowed to leave on your own. And so he says, let's come back peacefully. I do not want to try and have a war here. So he's trying to avoid a civil war. But he warns the South. He says, you need to come back. I'm not going to take away your slavery where it already exists. I just don't want it to spread. He says you need to give back the forts and the post office and all of the other buildings that you took over. You need to pay your taxes. And he says, but if you try and attack the North, we will respond and we're going to take it serious and it will be war. So let's jump into 16.2. Lincoln is ready to take office. The South is technically, they say that they're separated, but President Lincoln says, no, you're not. There's going to be an attack at Fort Sumter. So remember, the South wanted to take over this military base, and the food and supplies are running low. The supply ship never made it, and so they're going to have to surrender soon. Lincoln doesn't want that to happen. Jefferson Davis, who is the president of the South, is going to send a general there to take over the fort. But the people inside are part of the United States military. They are part of the North, and so they refuse. But you guys, the South attacks. The South is going to fire first. And the Northern troops will hang on for 2 days, but they are out of supplies and they are forced to surrender. And so at this point, Lincoln is going to ask Americans to start volunteering for the Army. And in the South, we're going to see Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, and Tennessee also join those seceded states in the Confederacy. So there are 11 states that are part of the Confederate States of America now. So Richmond, Virginia is going to become the new capital of the Confederacy. They move it farther north. And the states in the farther north of the Confederacy were stronger. They were a little more prepared for war. And the Confederates' attack on Fort Sumter will be the beginning of a bloody civil war. Because we have to ask ourselves, remember that question, what do we do if someone tries to take our land from us? We have to fight back. The South is trying to take this fort from the United States, from the Union. And so the Union is going to have to fight back. There will be advantages for both sides. The Union has more states, more population, 3 times as many people actually. They have factories, they have industrial labor, and more money to pay for the war. But you guys, the South also has major advantages. They are united in their fight to try and save their way of life. They have excellent military leaders who are familiar with being outside, working with firearms, riding horses. And also the fight's going to break out on their soil. And so they have a military advantage. The North is going to come up with this plan called the Anaconda Plan. He wants to surround the South through a 3-part assault, surround them and squeeze the life out of them like an anaconda would do. And so that's going to be the North's military plan. And all Lincoln was trying to do at this point is restore the Union, bring the South back peacefully. So here's an image of the Great Snake, as they called it, the Anaconda Plan. So the head is here by the Mississippi River. We're going to surround them and we're going to squeeze the life out of them until they have to surrender. And what does the South say to that? Well, the South says, this war started on our territory. It's in the South. Fort Sumter is technically in the South. If you want it back, you got to come here and fight. He thinks, not he, but they, I'm sorry, the South believes that the North is going to get bored and they're going to give up. And so they really count on that, and they just say, you can come to us if you want to fight. We are going to play defense. They are also thinking that the South will break the blockade. I'm sorry, Europe will break the blockade, because at this point the South is still trying to trade all of that cotton to make money for the war. And so they're going to try and count on Europe to continue trading with them so that they have money to fight against the North and their Anaconda Plan. Alrighty, I'm going to stop here. Make sure that you've got all the notes filled out. If you need to go back, you can. Make sure you pause on any slides if you're missing any fill in the blanks. Please do all the review questions for the notes. They're right in your notes packet. And then follow the rest of the directions for today.